Clara had always known that her life was supposed to be ordinary. She lived with her mother in a small, quiet house at the edge of town. Their home was old and smelled faintly of soap and freshly washed clothes, because her mother worked as a maid for one of the most respected music conservatories in the city. Every morning her mother would tie her apron tightly, kiss Clara's forehead, and hurry away to clean the grand halls and shining floors where the best young musicians practiced every day. Clara was a curious child, quiet, but always listening. When she was small, she used to wait for her mother to come home and tell stories about the place where music filled the air. Her mother would describe the students dressed neatly in black and white, their fingers dancing across piano keys, violins singing like birds, and teachers who carried themselves like royalty. Clara's eyes would shine each time she heard those stories. One evening, her mother said something that stayed in Clara's heart forever. She said, "Music sounds beautiful, but it doesn't belong to people like us." It was not said with bitterness, just truth. Her mother believed that beauty was meant for others, the rich, the talented, the educated. But Clara didn't believe that. To her, music didn't look at money or names. It simply waited for anyone brave enough to touch it. Sometimes when her mother was busy late at the conservatory, Clara would go along and wait quietly in the corner of the practice room. The grand piano stood there like a sleeping giant shining under the yellow light. Its keys looked like little teeth smiling at her. She was always told not to touch anything, but curiosity has a way of whispering louder than rules. One night, when everyone had left and her mother was sweeping the floor, Clara reached out and pressed a single key. The note echoed through the empty hall, soft but full of magic. She felt something stir inside her, like a spark waiting to grow into a flame. Her mother turned around sharply, ready to scold her. But when she saw the awe on Clara's face, she couldn't say a word. She just smiled tiredly and said, "Careful, Clara. That piano costs more than our house." From that day, Clara's heart belonged to music. Every time she could, she followed her mother to work. When the students practiced during the day, Clara listened from behind the door, memorizing the notes by ear. She watched their fingers, how they moved, fast, light, full of confidence. Then when night came and the conservatory was silent, she would sneak to the piano and try to copy what she had seen. At first, her fingers stumbled and made harsh sounds that made her laugh and wince at the same time. But little by little, she began to understand. Each mistake became a small teacher, and each right note made her heart beat faster. She didn't know the names of the notes, nor could she read the black marks on the paper. But her ears and her heart worked together perfectly. Her mother noticed the change. Sometimes when Clara came home, she hummed melodies she had no business knowing. "Where did you learn that?" her mother would ask, pretending to be angry but secretly proud. Clara would just smile and shrug, her eyes shining with mischief. Life continued like that, simple but full of secret dreams. Outside, Clara helped her mother with chores, fetched water, and studied in the small local school. Inside, her mind danced with invisible music. She would lie awake at night, imagining herself sitting on a big stage, her hands flying over the piano, the audience clapping and cheering. Then she would laugh at herself and whisper, "It's just a dream." Clara, just a dream, yet somewhere deep inside, she believed that dreams had power, especially when they refused to fade. The conservatory itself was like another world to her. Its marble floors, golden chandeliers, and portraits of famous composers made her feel like she was stepping into a storybook. Sometimes she would stare at the portraits, wondering if those serious-looking men with powdered wigs would smile if they saw her playing their music. The other staff members liked her. They called her Little Melody because she was always humming. But there were also a few who frowned when they saw her near the instruments. "Children of maids should not touch what's not theirs," one of the older workers once said. Clara didn't answer, but those words stung. Still, the piano called to her more strongly than fear ever could, and so the quiet little girl kept learning in secret. While others had teachers, books, and lessons, Clara had dust, silence, and a stubborn will. Her small hands grew stronger. Her ears became sharper. She learned to play with emotion because that was all she had. No fancy training, no expensive piano, only a heart full of feeling. Sometimes, after finishing her secret practice, she would whisper to the piano, "Thank you for listening." It became her closest friend, her secret keeper. She had no idea that her hidden world of music would soon collide with the grand world above her. She didn't know that one day the most famous maestro of all would hear her play, and that her quiet notes would echo louder than any words ever could. For now, she was just Clara, the maid's daughter, the little girl who played for no one but herself, in an empty hall filled with dreams. The morning the maestro arrived, the whole conservatory felt different, like the air itself had grown heavier. Even the floors seemed to shine brighter, as if they too knew someone important was coming. The staff rushed around, polishing everything twice, fixing flowers, straightening curtains, and whispering nervously. For Clara, it was just another day following her mother to work. But she could sense the change. Her mother was unusually quiet, her movements faster and more careful. "Clara," she said softly, "don't wander around today. The maestro is coming." "The maestro," Clara repeated. "Is he famous?" Her mother looked at her with wide eyes. "He's more than famous. He's a legend." His name was Maestro Reinhardt, a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the country. He was said to have ears that could catch the smallest mistake, a mind sharper than any critic's pen, and a heart that belonged entirely to music. He had trained some of the world's finest pianists and conducted orchestras in grand halls filled with royalty. But behind his brilliance was a temper known to make even the boldest students tremble. As the clock struck 10, the conservatory's grand doors opened. Reinhardt entered with an air of quiet power. His silver hair gleamed under the light and his black coat flowed behind him like a shadow. The director of the academy greeted him with a bow, and everyone around stopped what they were doing. Clara, who stood by the stairs, held her breath. He looked around the hall as if inspecting the soul of the building itself. His eyes missed nothing. Not the crooked picture frame, not the unevenly lit chandelier, not even the speck of dust on a piano lid. "I expect perfection," he said calmly, though his voice carried like thunder. Clara's mother lowered her head respectfully as he passed. She had seen many important people before, but something about him made her knees feel weak. When he disappeared into the rehearsal hall, everyone sighed in relief, as if a storm had just moved to another room. That afternoon, while her mother cleaned the upper floors, Clara sat quietly in the corner of the empty dining area, listening. Through the open doors came sounds of students practicing, scales, runs, and trills, all trying to impress the maestro. But every few minutes a voice would boom, "No, no, no. Where is your feeling? These are just notes, not music." Then came silence, followed by hesitant playing again. Clara felt sorry for the students. She could imagine how nervous they must be, their hearts racing, fingers stiff with fear. Yet she also admired the maestro's passion. He seemed like someone who demanded more than skill, someone who wanted truth from every note. Later that day, while helping her mother carry cleaning supplies, Clara caught sight of him again. He stood near the grand piano in the main hall, surrounded by teachers. The piano looked small beside him. He was speaking softly now, almost tenderly, as his fingers brushed over the keys. The melody he played, just a few notes, was enough to make Clara stop in her tracks. It was sad, gentle, and full of memories. She had never heard anything like it. Her mother tugged her arm. "Don't stare, Clara," she whispered. "Come along." But Clara's eyes lingered. For the first time she saw not just a famous man, but someone who spoke the same language she did, the language of music. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Clara's mother stayed behind to finish some extra work. Clara sat quietly near the piano again, tracing the smooth wood with her fingers. "Mama," she asked, "do you think the maestro ever made mistakes when he was young?" Her mother smiled faintly. "Everyone makes mistakes. But people like him, they learn faster. They have chances that others don't." Clara thought about that as she looked at her reflection in the polished piano. She didn't have lessons or books or teachers, but she had something inside that refused to stay quiet. The next day, whispers spread through the conservatory like wind through trees. "The maestro will be choosing one student," someone said. "A single performer to represent the academy at the royal concert." The news filled the halls with excitement and fear. Students practiced harder than ever, their music echoing day and night. Clara overheard two of them talking. "Imagine being chosen," one said. "It would change everything." "Yes," the other replied, "but only perfection will impress him." "But only perfection will impress him." That night Clara couldn't sleep. She imagined standing before the maestro, playing something so beautiful that even he would have nothing to say. Then she shook her head and smiled sadly. "Silly dream," she whispered to herself. The following afternoon, while the maestro was giving a lecture to the senior students, Clara's mother asked her to fetch a cleaning rag from the main hall. Clara tiptoed in quietly, careful not to make a sound. The room was empty, sunlight spilling across the piano keys like golden ribbons. She hesitated, glancing toward the door. Then, drawn by something she couldn't explain, she sat down at the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She remembered the melody she had heard the maestro play the day before, soft and full of sorrow. Gently, she began to repeat it, adding her own tiny changes as if she were speaking back to him in her own way. What Clara didn't know was that the maestro had finished his lecture early. He walked down the hall following the faint sound of music. When he reached the door, he stopped. Inside, he saw a small girl, her back straight, her eyes closed, playing his melody with the kind of emotion he hadn't heard in years. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply listened. And in that moment, the maestro realized that sometimes music finds its way not through privilege or training, but through the pure heart of someone who was never meant to be noticed. The morning the maestro arrived, the whole conservatory felt different, like the air itself had grown heavier. Even the floors seemed to shine brighter, as if they too knew someone important was coming. The staff rushed around, polishing everything twice, fixing flowers, straightening curtains, and whispering nervously. For Clara, it was just another day following her mother to work. But she could sense the change. Her mother was unusually quiet, her movements faster and more careful. "Clara," she said softly, "don't wander around today. The maestro is coming." "The maestro?" Clara repeated. "Is he famous?" Her mother looked at her with wide eyes. "He's more than famous. He's a legend." His name was Maestro Reinhardt, a man whose reputation stretched far beyond the country. He was said to have ears that could catch the smallest mistake, a mind sharper than any critic's pen, and a heart that belonged entirely to music. He had trained some of the world's finest pianists and conducted orchestras in grand halls filled with royalty. But behind his brilliance was a temper known to make even the boldest students tremble. As the clock struck 10, the conservatory's grand doors opened. Reinhardt entered with an air of quiet power. His silver hair gleamed under the light and his black coat flowed behind him like a shadow. The director of the academy greeted him with a bow, and everyone around stopped what they were doing. Clara, who stood by the stairs, held her breath. He looked around the hall as if inspecting the soul of the building itself. His eyes missed nothing. Not the crooked picture frame, not the unevenly lit chandelier, not even the speck of dust on a piano lid. "I expect perfection," he said calmly, though his voice carried like thunder. Clara's mother lowered her head respectfully as he passed. She had seen many important people before, but something about him made her knees feel weak. When he disappeared into the rehearsal hall, everyone sighed in relief, as if a storm had just moved to another room. That afternoon, while her mother cleaned the upper floors, Clara sat quietly in the corner of the empty dining area, listening. Through the open doors came sounds of students practicing, scales, runs, and trills, and all trying to impress the maestro. But every few minutes a voice would boom, "No, no, no. Where is your feeling? These are just notes, not music." Then came silence, followed by hesitant playing again. Clara felt sorry for the students. She could imagine how nervous they must be, their hearts racing, fingers stiff with fear. Yet she also admired the maestro's passion. He seemed like someone who demanded more than skill, someone who wanted truth from every note. Later that day, while helping her mother carry cleaning supplies, Clara caught sight of him again. He stood near the grand piano in the main hall, surrounded by teachers. The piano looked small beside him. He was speaking softly now, almost tenderly, as his fingers brushed over the keys. The melody he played, just a few notes, was enough to make Clara stop in her tracks. It was sad, gentle, and full of memories. She had never heard anything like it. Her mother tugged her arm. "Don't stare, Clara," she whispered. "Come along." But Clara's eyes lingered. For the first time, she saw not just a famous man, but someone who spoke the same language she did, the language of music. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Clara's mother stayed behind to finish some extra work. Clara sat quietly near the piano again, tracing the smooth wood with her fingers. "Mama," she asked, "do you think the maestro ever made mistakes when he was young?" Her mother smiled faintly. "Everyone makes mistakes. But people like him, they learn faster. They have chances that others don't." Clara thought about that as she looked at her reflection in the polished piano. She didn't have lessons or books or teachers, but she had something inside that refused to stay quiet. The next day, whispers spread through the conservatory like wind through trees. "The maestro will be choosing one student," someone said. "A single performer to represent the academy at the royal concert." The news filled the halls with excitement and fear. Students practiced harder than ever, their music echoing day and night. Clara overheard two of them talking. "Imagine being chosen," one said. "It would change everything." "Yes," the other replied, "but only perfection will impress him." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She imagined standing before the maestro, playing something so beautiful that even he would have nothing to say. Then she shook her head and smiled sadly. "Silly dream," she whispered to herself. The following afternoon, while the maestro was giving a lecture to the senior students, Clara's mother asked her to fetch a cleaning rag from the main hall. Clara tiptoed in quietly, careful not to make a sound. The room was empty, sunlight spilling across the piano keys like golden ribbons. She hesitated, glancing toward the door. Then, drawn by something she couldn't explain, she sat down at the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She remembered the melody she had heard the maestro play the day before, soft and full of sorrow. Gently, she began to repeat it, adding her own tiny changes as if she were speaking back to him in her own way. What Clara didn't know was that the maestro had finished his lecture early. He walked down the hall following the faint sound of music. When he reached the door, he stopped. Inside, he saw a small girl, her back straight, her eyes closed, playing his melody with the kind of emotion he hadn't heard in years. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply listened. And in that moment, the maestro realized that sometimes music finds its way not through privilege or training, but through the pure heart of someone who was never meant to be noticed. The next morning began quietly, with soft sunlight falling through the tall conservatory windows. The grand hall, usually full of sound, was silent after a long night of rehearsals. Clara arrived early with her mother, carrying a small basket of cleaning cloths. The air still smelled faintly of polish and roses from yesterday's event. Her mother handed her a broom and said gently, "Stay here, dear. I'll clean the upstairs rooms. Don't touch anything, all right?" Clara nodded obediently, though her eyes had already wandered toward the piano at the center of the hall. Its surface shone like liquid gold under the morning light. She could almost hear the echo of her secret playing from yesterday. Her fingers itched to feel the keys again. She waited until her mother disappeared upstairs. The hall was empty. Only the distant ticking of a clock and the faint hum of the city outside broke the silence. Clara approached the piano as if walking toward a secret. Her heart beat faster. She looked around once more, then lifted the lid carefully. The soft creak of the hinge sounded louder than it should have. She smiled nervously and sat down. Her small hands rested on the keys. For a moment she didn't play, she just breathed. Then with a deep sigh she began. The melody that came out was gentle at first, shy and hesitant, like a bird testing its wings. But as her confidence grew, the notes became clearer, stronger, more alive. She was playing something she had made herself, a little song built from fragments she remembered from listening to the students. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of feeling. The music floated through the hall, rising up to the chandeliers and echoing softly against the marble walls. Clara closed her eyes and let her hands move where her heart told them to. For those few minutes, she forgot who she was. She wasn't the maid's daughter anymore. She was just a girl who loved the piano. But someone else was listening. From the doorway at the far end of the hall, Maestro Reinhardt had entered quietly. He had come to review the students' schedules, but the moment he heard the music, he stopped. The sound was raw, emotional, unpolished, yet it carried something rare, something he hadn't heard in a long time. He stood there, his eyes narrowing slightly. The player was too young for such emotion, too inexperienced for such tone. He took a few silent steps forward until he could see her clearly. A small girl, maybe 10 or 11, sat on the piano bench, lost in her own world. Her fingers weren't perfect and they slipped sometimes, but she didn't flinch. Every mistake became part of the story she was telling, through the conservatory like wildfire. The staff whispered, "The maestro is teaching the maid's daughter." Some found it inspiring. Others called it ridiculous. What can a child with no training learn? They said behind her back. He's wasting his time. But Reinhardt didn't care. He saw something in her, something even he couldn't quite explain. One chilly morning he made an announcement that shocked everyone. The royal concert was approaching, and instead of one of his top students he had chosen her. Gasps filled the room. The teachers looked at each other in disbelief. Even Clara thought she had misheard. "Me?" she whispered. Reinhardt nodded. "Yes, you will play at the concert." Her heart almost stopped. "But maestro, I can't. The others, they're better." He looked at her sternly. "Better is not the same as truer. You play with honesty. That's what people remember." Still, she was terrified. Her mother cried when she heard the news. Not out of sadness, but out of fear and pride tangled together. "Clara," she said, holding her face in her hands, "this world is not kind. Promise me you'll be brave." "I will," Clara whispered. "For you." The day of the concert arrived like a dream and a storm combined. The royal hall shimmered under golden chandeliers. The audience was filled with elegant people, nobles, musicians, critics, and even the royal family. Everyone came expecting to see the maestro's finest student perform. No one expected a maid's daughter to walk on stage. Backstage, Clara could barely breathe. Her hands were shaking so badly she thought she wouldn't even be able to touch the keys. Reinhardt knelt beside her. For once, his strictness melted away. "Listen to me, Clara," he said softly. "You're not here to prove anyone wrong. You're here to speak the truth only you can tell. Don't play for them. Play for yourself." She nodded, though tears burned behind her eyes. When her name was announced, a wave of confusion rippled through the hall. The murmuring began. "Who is she? A student? She looks like a servant's child." Clara stepped out onto the stage. Her small shoes clicked against the polished wood. The lights were bright, blinding. The grand piano waited in the center, majestic and silent. She could feel hundreds of eyes staring at her. Her legs trembled as she sat down. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the black surface of the piano lid. She took a deep breath and remembered the maestro's words. "Play your truth." Then she began. The first notes were soft, like whispers in a quiet room. Her hands moved carefully, almost shyly, but then the melody began to grow. The piece was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the very one the maestro had challenged her with. At first, the audience expected mistakes. Some leaned forward, ready to frown, ready to judge. But as Clara continued, something unexpected happened. Her playing was not perfect, Rose, but it was alive. Each note carried emotion, sorrow, hope, courage, and love. The rise of her hands, the fall of her touch. Everything spoke directly to the heart. She wasn't just performing. She was telling a story, her story. The hall grew still. The whispers stopped. Even the maestro, seated at the side, found himself holding his breath. Her mother, standing behind the curtain, covered her mouth to hide her tears. She had heard her daughter play in empty halls, but this was different. This was Clara becoming everything she was meant to be. The music built higher, powerful, stormy, full of life. Her small body swayed with the rhythm. Her eyes closed, her heart open. The audience watched in awe. They weren't hearing a maid's daughter anymore. They were witnessing pure music. As the final notes rang out, the sound seemed to float in the air, refusing to die. Clara's hands fell still. She didn't dare look up. The silence that followed was heavy and endless. Then, one clap. It came from the maestro. Slow, strong, deliberate. Another followed, then another. And then the entire hall erupted into applause. People stood cheering, shouting her name. The echo filled the room like thunder. Clara looked up, dazed. Tears blurred her vision. The maestro stood, his eyes shining with pride he didn't try to hide. He walked up to the stage, bowed slightly to her, and said so quietly only she could hear, "Now, they understand." Her mother rushed forward, unable to stop herself, and hugged her tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." Clara's lips trembled into a smile. "Mama," she said softly, "I just played what I felt." That night, As the applause still echoed in her ears, Clara realized something. True music didn't come from fancy halls, perfect training, or expensive instruments. It came from the heart, from the courage to play even when no one believes you should. And in that moment, the maid's daughter had not just played the piano, she had made the world listen. When the applause finally faded, Maestro Reinhardt stayed still, watching Clara bow shyly to the cheering crowd. His chest felt heavy, not with pride alone, but with something deeper, something that shook him quietly from within. For years, he had trained hundreds of students, children of wealth, prodigies from around the world, all molded under his perfectionist eye, yet none of them, not one, had ever played the way this girl just had. Her music had no polish, no practiced showmanship, and still, it had touched every soul in the hall. After the performance, the royal family personally requested to meet the little pianist. The queen herself smiled warmly and said, "Such emotion in one so young, how extraordinary." Clara curtsied awkwardly, her cheeks pink. The nobles clapped politely, but their eyes kept glancing toward the maestro, waiting for his approval. Reinhardt stepped forward. "This young girl," he said slowly, "has reminded us all why we fell in love with music in the first place." Clara turned to look at him, unsure if she had done something wonderful or wrong. He met her gaze, his stern face softened into the faintest smile. After the event ended, while others celebrated, Reinhardt quietly left the stage and walked alone through the empty corridors of the conservatory. The echo of Clara's music still lingered in his mind, those trembling notes so pure and human. He found himself stopping before an old mirror near the director's office. The man staring back at him looked tired, older than he remembered. "When," he whispered to his reflection, "did I forget what music truly means?" He thought about his long years of teaching, how he had turned music into something mechanical, precise, disciplined to the point of lifelessness. He had demanded perfection, punished mistakes, and worshipped the score more than the soul. Somewhere along the way, he had lost the warmth that once lived in his own heart. But that little girl, the maid's daughter, had reminded him. Her playing was full of flaws, yet each wrong note was alive with meaning. Every pause had breath, every chord had emotion. It wasn't training, it was truth. That night, he sat alone at the grand piano in his private room. His fingers rested on the keys, but for the first time in years, he didn't play one of the great masters. He simply let his hands wander, chasing the echo of Clara's feeling. The music that came out was fragile, uncertain, but real. The next morning, he called Clara and her mother to his office. They arrived nervously, unsure why they had been summoned. Her mother's hands were shaking, clutching her apron. "Please, sir," she began, "if she's caused trouble, I'll—" Reinhardt raised a hand gently. "No trouble. None at all." He looked at Clara. "You did something remarkable yesterday." Clara lowered her eyes. "Thank you, sir." He studied her for a moment, then asked, "Do you know what made your performance special?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Because I meant every note." Reinhardt smiled faintly. "Exactly. You didn't just play the piano, you spoke with it. That's something I cannot teach, but," he added, his tone turning serious, "you also have much to learn. Technique, discipline, control. Those will be your tools. Emotion is your fire, but tools will keep that fire alive." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Sir," she whispered, "we can't afford lessons here." "Clara can't," he interrupted gently. "She will not pay." "I will teach her myself," her mother gasped. "Sir, that's too kind." "It's not kindness," Reinhardt said quietly. "It's a duty. Talent like hers doesn't belong in the shadows." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The sunlight streaming through the window bathed them in gold, and for the first time, Clara felt she wasn't invisible. Someone important had seen her, truly seen her. Over the following months, Maestro Reinhardt became both mentor and protector. He guided her patiently, never raising his voice, though his eyes still carried the same sharpness.
He taught her the language of music, how to read, how to breathe between phrases,
how to let silence speak. But sometimes, while she practiced, he would catch himself smiling, quietly, secretly, because he realized she was also teaching him something he had forgotten: wonder. One afternoon, as she played a slow emotional piece, he felt a lump in his throat. He remembered his own childhood, the first time he had touched a piano. when his parents had forbidden it because it was a poor man's dream. He had fought his way up through pride and discipline, but in that climb, he had buried the boy who once loved the sound of a single honest note. Clara's music brought that boy back to life. He sighed deeply, looking at her. "Do you know what you've done to me, child?" he asked. She paused mid-song, puzzled. "Did I play wrong again?" He chuckled softly. "No," he said. "You played too right." Softly. "No," he said. "You played too right." She tilted her head, not understanding. He smiled. "Never mind, just keep that heart of yours safe. The world will try to change it." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the conservatory walls, Reinhardt watched Clara and her mother walk home together, the child skipping lightly, the mother smiling with pride. He stood by the window for a long time, his hand resting on the piano lid. The echoes of Clara's playing filled his mind once more. In that moment, Maestro Reinhardt realized something simple but profound, that genius wasn't something you could create, polish, or own. True genius was born from truth, from pain, from love. It could come from anyone, even a maid's daughter. And as he turned away from the window, a small tear rolled down his wrinkled cheek. For the first time in many years, the maestro felt humble and deeply, beautifully human again. Months passed after the concert, and the once quiet halls of the conservatory were no longer the same. Everyone knew Clara now, the little girl who had silenced a royal hall with nothing but honesty and music. Students who once looked at her with pity or doubt now watched her with awe. Some even tried to copy her expressions while playing, but it never sounded the same. Maestro Reinhardt continued to train her, though he treated her differently from anyone else. With other students, he was strict and sharp. With Clara, he was patient but demanding, pushing her limits while protecting her spirit. Technique can be learned, he often said, but soul must never be broken. Every morning, Clara would arrive early, carrying a small piece of bread in her pocket for breakfast. Her mother still worked in the conservatory, cleaning rooms and polishing floors. Though life hadn't changed much on the outside, inside their hearts something had shifted. They were no longer invisible. Sometimes, between lessons, Reinhardt would watch her play with the sunlight streaming across the keys, and he would think, "This child is not mine to own. She is music's gift to the world." Then one morning, a letter arrived from the royal palace. It was sealed with the king's golden emblem. Reinhardt opened it slowly, and as he read, a rare smile crept across his face. He called for Clara immediately. She came running, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, maestro?" He held the letter out to her. "Read this." She looked at the elegant handwriting and shook her head. "I can't read all the big words, sir," he chuckled. "Then listen." He read aloud. "The Royal Orchestra requests the presence of young Clara Fischer to perform as the guest pianist for the annual Grand Symphony in Vienna. Her talent has been spoken of across the country, and the court wishes to hear her once again." Clara blinked. "They want me? "Yes, you," Reinhardt said, his eyes gleaming. "You will play for the world this time." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Maestro, I don't deserve this." Reinhardt leaned forward. "Deserve? Talent doesn't ask who deserves it. It simply is. You've earned this, Clara." When she ran to tell her mother, the older woman dropped her cleaning rag, her eyes wide. "The royal palace?" she gasped. "Oh, Clara, that's far away. We've never even left town." Clara hugged her tightly. "I'll make you proud, Mama." Her mother's voice shook. "You already have." The weeks that followed were filled with preparation. Reinhardt became even more focused, though a strange softness had entered his eyes. He knew that this concert would change her life forever, and perhaps end this chapter of their journey together. He trained her in long sessions, teaching her not only how to play but how to command the stage with grace. "When you walk out there," he told her, "you mustn't think about who's watching. You must think only of what the music wants to say through you." Clara listened carefully, absorbing every word. She practiced until her fingers ached, until the keys felt like extensions of her own body. Every mistake she made, she fixed with patience. Every melody she played, she filled with heart. Finally, the night before her departure, Reinhardt invited her and her mother to his home for dinner. A rare gesture. His house was filled with books, instruments, and photographs of famous musicians he had trained. But what caught Clara's eye was an old black and white picture on the piano, a young boy sitting beside a piano with a small smile. "Who's that?" she asked softly. Reinhardt's eyes softened. "That's me," he said. "When I first fell in love with music." "You look happy," she said. "I was," he replied quietly. "Before I forgot what music was really for." He looked at her gently. "You reminded me, Clara." Her eyes glistened. "Me," he nodded. "You gave me back the part of myself I thought I had lost." For a moment, no one spoke. The ticking clock was the only sound. Then her mother said softly, "Maestro, thank you for believing in her." Reinhardt shook his head. "No, I didn't believe in her. I simply heard her. The rest was easy." The next morning, the carriage came to take them to the train station. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Clara wore a simple white dress, her hair neatly braided. Her mother stood beside her, holding her hand tightly, while Reinhardt adjusted his hat, his eyes glistening though he tried to hide it. "Remember, Clara," he said quietly, "when you sit before that piano, don't play to impress. Don't play to prove anyone wrong. Just play to be heard." Clara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Maestro." As the carriage began to move, she leaned out the window and called, "Will you come to the concert?" He smiled, though his throat tightened. "Of course, my dear. I wouldn't miss it for the world." He watched until the carriage disappeared down the road, the sound of its wheels fading into the morning breeze. Then, standing alone before the conservatory, he whispered to himself, "Go show them, little one. Show them what truth sounds like." That night, Reinhardt sat at his piano once more. The room was quiet, but in his heart he could already hear Clara's music traveling across cities, filling halls, silencing crowds, just as it once had done here. He smiled softly and closed his eyes. For the first time in many years, he felt at peace, because he knew that somewhere out there, the maid's daughter, the girl with music in her soul, was about to make the whole world listen. The great city of Vienna looked like something out of a dream. Its streets glowed under golden lamplight and its air buzzed with excitement. Posters hung outside the Royal Concert Hall, announcing the night's event. Grand Symphony Night. Special guest, Clara Fischer. When Clara saw her name printed among famous musicians, her breath caught. It didn't feel real. She was just a maid's daughter from a small town, yet here she was standing where legends had performed. Her heart pounded with fear and wonder. The hall itself was breathtaking, tall ceilings painted with angels, chandeliers that glittered like stars, and rows upon rows of seats filling up with the finest people in Europe. Reporters, musicians, nobles, everyone had come to see the mysterious child prodigy who had astonished the royal court months before. Backstage, Clara sat quietly beside her mother, who was holding her hands tightly. "Are you nervous, my love?" her mother whispered. Clara nodded, her voice trembling. "A little." "What if I forget everything?" Her mother smiled gently. "Then you'll start again. You've already done the impossible, Clara. The rest is just music," the stage manager knocked softly. 5 minutes. Clara closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Play the truth." She thought of Maestro Reinhardt's face, his calm eyes, his rare smile, his words that still echoed in her heart. She imagined him sitting somewhere in the crowd, watching her, believing in her. When her name was called, the hall erupted in applause. Clara walked out slowly, her small figure bathed in golden light. She wore a simple white dress, nothing fancy, just pure and graceful like her music. She bowed, sat at the piano, and let silence settle. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then she began. The first notes drifted through the hall, soft as falling snow. She wasn't playing to impress anyone. She was simply telling her story. Each note carried a piece of her heart, the nights she had played in secret halls, the fear, the hope, the joy of finally being heard. The music grew stronger, richer, flowing like a river that refused to be stopped. Her small hands danced across the keys with grace beyond her years. Some notes were bold, others fragile, but together they painted something honest, something human. Painted something honest, something human. In the front row, Maestro Reinhardt watched silently. His eyes were fixed on her, his hands clasped tightly together. He had traveled all the way from their town to see her, though he hadn't told her he was coming. When he saw her play, his eyes filled with tears. He wasn't watching a student anymore. He was witnessing the birth of an artist. As the final movement rose, the entire hall seemed to pulse with energy. Every listener could feel the emotion, the love between mother and child, the dream of someone poor daring to reach for the impossible, the power of truth hidden in a melody. When Clara struck the final chord, the sound rang out like a bell. Then came silence, deep, endless, sacred silence. No one moved. No one dared to break the moment, and then, as if released from a spell, the hall exploded into applause, louder than thunder, longer than she had ever heard. People stood shouting her name, throwing flowers onto the stage. The queen herself wiped tears from her eyes. Clara rose, trembling, and bowed. For a moment she looked toward the front row, and there he was. Maestro Reinhardt, standing and clapping with the proudest smile she had ever seen. Their eyes met, and in that look everything was said. Later, backstage as the crowd celebrated, Reinhardt found her sitting quietly with her mother. He approached slowly. Clara ran to him, her eyes bright with tears. "You came," she whispered. He nodded. "Of course. I told you I wouldn't miss it," she smiled shyly. "Did I play well?" He placed his hand on her shoulder. "No," he said softly. "You didn't play well." Her face fell until he added, "You played beautifully." She laughed through her tears, and her mother joined in, her heart full. The maestro took a deep breath. "Clara, the world will now want you. They will praise you. They will demand more from you. But remember, music isn't about fame. It's about honesty. Promise me you'll never lose that." "I promise," she whispered. Years passed after that night. Clara grew into a celebrated pianist, traveling across countries, playing in grand halls and earning standing ovations wherever she went. But no matter how far she went, she never forgot where she came from, or the man who believed in her when no one else did. Whenever she played, she still imagined her mother listening in the back row, wiping away proud tears. She still imagined the maestro, arms crossed, eyes soft, whispering, "Feel it, Clara." When Maestro Reinhardt grew old and frail, Clara visited him often. She would play softly beside his bed, her fingers still light, her music still true. He would close his eyes and smile faintly. "You kept your promise," he would say. And when the maestro finally passed away one quiet morning, Clara played at his funeral, the same melody she had played the day he first found her. Her tears fell on the piano keys, but her hands never stopped. The notes carried through the church, rising into the air, reaching wherever he had gone. From that day onward, people said that whenever Clara played, there was something different in her music, something almost spiritual, as if a part of the maestro still played through her hands. And even many years later, when she became known as one of the greatest pianists of her time, she would tell the same story whenever people asked how she began. "I was just the maid's daughter," she would say softly. But one day a great maestro listened, and the world has been listening ever since. The echoes of her music never faded. They lived on, in every heart she touched, in every tear her notes brought, in every soul reminded that true talent doesn't come from privilege. It comes from the courage to be heard, to be heard.